Hello people of the internet, it's Amanda, and it's been a while since I've talked about a J-movie slash J-drama here on my channel, and I figured, you know what, this one is a good one to start with after a while because it's currently screening in Philippine cinemas. I'm talking about My Happy Marriage, or Watashi no Shiawase na Kekkon. In the Philippine cinemas, it's currently titled as Long as We Both Shall Live, and it stars Meguro Ren and Imada Mio. Now, to be perfectly honest, I was quite 50-50 whether or not I want to talk about this particular project, simply because I do have some opinions about that the lead actors that are currently in the film, both a mix of positive and negative ones, and I didn't really want to dip into that particular territory. That's the reason why I kind of avoided certain projects of certain leads to be mentioned here on my channel, even if I've received requests before to kind of if I want to talk about this or that, so but for this one, I've mentioned in my previous videos that I want to review movies that are either in streaming sites as well, or with this opportunity, because we don't really get a lot of Philippine or Japanese movies being streamed in Philippine cinemas, because we're still very much dominated with the K-wave and everything like that. So the more that they're putting here, it's really such a good opportunity, and that's a reason that compelled me to make this video. But so I'll reserve more of my objective thoughts later as we go along. But with that said, so let's talk about the plot first. I don't want to get into the lore of things. There's an anime version of this on Netflix. It's also from a light novel, and they kind of explain the lore about the fantasy side of it, like the magic, the powers, all these types of things in the movie as well. But I want to focus on kind of the overarching narrative of it, which is the love story, because the title of My Happy Marriage, it kind of revolves around these two characters, and I think that's the focal point that I want to focus on for today's review. So the story is about Saimori Miyo, which is played by Imada Mio, and she comes from the Saimori clan, which is a very prestigious family. However, at a young age, her mother dies. Her mother, Chiziya Tao, makes a cameo in this film as Miyo's mother, and I absolutely love her, so I love that I was able to see her in this film. But besides that, she, Miyo's mother dies and she was very, very young. And after that, her father remarries, and her stepmom, as well as their stepdaughter slash her new stepsister, as well as her father, treats her like trash. And it's a Cinderella story minus the singing mice and all that. She kind of starts to develop this kind of servant mentality in a way that she's always very apologetic. Cinderella in the original Disney film even has a little bit of sass on her, but for Mio, she's just a very defeated type of character. She's very used to people abusing her, both verbally and at the same time the way that they treat her. It was such a sad, the first couple of scenes of this movie is just very, very sad in my opinion. And then she eventually gets engaged to Kudo Kiyoka, who is played by Meguro Ren. Now, Kudo is known as this very kind of stoic, cold, ruthless kind of soldier, warrior, all these things. He has this kind of reputation that the usual character where he's amazing and all that, but his personality is also very stone cold, that type of thing. So again, we see these two characters fitting these certain very stereotypical type of templates, if you will, but as the narrative suggests, they kind of start learning more about each other as they interact, and they get a better understanding of who the other person is, and eventually they start developing feelings for one another. But the thing with this is, because there are certain bigger threats happening around them, there are other conflicts that they had to deal with as well. So that falls into the more fantasy lore aspect of the story. But overall, it is a love story where like two unlikely people meet and then fall in love. And the idea of it, with the title of the movie as well, it's really more of like, fitting into the puzzle of this kind of like marriage that eventually worked for both of them. So yeah. Now, first things first about the plot, I found it really, like, it runs at 115 minutes, and in the mid part of it, or like the mid conflict that happens in the film, to me is just very dramatic, and it's kind of like funny in a way. I personally found it funny because it was more of, the stepmother, the father, and the stepdaughter being all, weird and all of that, and kind of like wanting Kudo to marry the stepdaughter with powers instead of Miyo. So because he's kind of like this reputable soldier and all that, and there's kind of like jealousy, the typical petty evil stepmother, evil stepsister type of thing. But I don't know, it was just so dramatic in a way, and I found that entire conflict really, really funny. Like, I get the point of it. And from a kind of like Cinderella-esque inspired standpoint, it makes sense. It's kind of like a more dramatized version of when the stepmother and the stepsisters were kind of like interfering with Cinderella being fitted for the glass shoe type of thing. I wouldn't spoil anything beyond that. But to me, that middle conflict was kind of like really funny. It makes sense for the plot and all that. But yeah, but given how dramatic that particular part is, we kind of like transition into the second part of the narrative, which is more of like the action centric part of it. It explores more of like the lore that is being explained as to, the powers, the evils that they had to, like, the character of Kudo has to like deal with him being a soldier, with the narrative being set in kind of like this fictional Meiji era. So again, it's just kind of like after one battle of them dealing with Miyo's side of the family, it's another battle that has to do with Kudo's occupation. And again, wouldn't spoil too much of it. It also reveals some other things about Miyo's character and all these things. So, and I understand that because this is a film as compared to a series, they had to condense a lot of the arcs and all that into this 115 minutes that they're given. So it is understandable why certain things are paced the way they did. Move on to the lead actors, because again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I do have certain thoughts. Yeah. Now, with Imada Mio, I absolutely love her. I love it. I feel like she really fits, the kind of like roles that she's had before, where she's usually the rich girl, the sassy girl, the badass girl, with Hana no Chihare, Sanin Igimi, with Trillion Game very recently, also with Meguro Ren. So, but I'm really happy that despite initially being typecasted into those types of roles, and I think she still is being given those kinds of roles in a way in certain recent projects, that she is also being given more roles that kind of like express her versatility as an actress. So I know that she's recently played like an office like a very just nice jolly office worker recently. There's another project of hers where it's a little bit more leaning on like a dramatic type of narrative, and then for this one it really displays this kind of like vulnerability, this very timid type of character that is such a contrast from the other roles that she's played before. And I absolutely love that for her. I think she did really well, even with the parts that that was so sad to see. I absolutely love how like her in this particular role as well, and I think she again, she was able to add a certain rawness to it that you really feel for the character of Mio, not Imada Mio as an actress, but Mio, her character in the movie. Because you can see it in the way that her eyes and her fingers and just her the little nuances in her acting, that she really kind of like embodied that pitiful kind of like sad, vulnerable, hurt character that she is portraying on screen. So I absolutely love that. I know that a lot of people appreciate the chemistry between her and Meguro Ren, so they've appeared in this one as well as in Trillion Game, which is also available on Netflix. And yeah, I guess they do have that kind of like on-screen chemistry that made it work for like even if the dynamic of the characters are very, very different. So that's great. I have no qualms about that. Now when it comes to Meguro Ren, so here's where it gets tricky. People who know me know that I'm not the biggest fan of him. I don't really have a lot of opinions about him. It's really just more of I know that a lot of people like him, like his other projects. There's this one scene from his recent drama Silent that went really viral like crazy. I know that he's won some awards recently for his several acting works, which I think is really good for him. But based from the projects of him that I've seen him in, he usually turns out to be my least favorite character in these projects. And I feel like it has to do with just other actors or other characters outshining him, even if he's in the lead role. And again, it's just my objective opinion on the matter. It's just a matter of preference. And that's the reason why, even if I gotten requests to talk about his other works before, not necessarily just him in the lead spotlight, but for other reasons, I try as much as possible to like stray away from it, because one, I know that he has a huge following. Two, I don't know, I just didn't want to dip my toes into that. Like, even if I've talked about my favorites, even my own favorite actors I've talked about before in a poor light if I want to. But again, I just didn't have the energy for what that might ensue. But yeah. And then for this one, it was fine. Like, it was okay. But I feel like, again, given I'm just not a fan of characters who are just stoic, I guess. And it's such a huge contrast to what Imada Mio brought to the role. So for me, his performance is kind of like, okay, sure. Another thing is that I'm not sure if it's because of the pacing of the movie, but I didn't get any of that stoicism in his character at all. Like, I don't feel like the character was, or the performance was nuanced really, in a way that, he's said to be this, there's this reputation, and that's why a lot of people like couldn't get close to him, is because he is this persona and all that. But I wasn't able to see that. I wasn't able to see layers of that of him. Like, to me, he showed it in a way that he's immediately affectionate of Mio's character, and at the same time his comrades, which is understandable, but there wasn't enough to make me see the stoicism that they were kind of like trying to sell his character as, And again, I do understand that maybe it has to do with like this the time frame of the film, but I've seen other films before where they were able to establish that character profile and the different nuances of if he's this, but he's very different towards his love interest or that. I wanted to see that difference, if you will. Like, when they said that, he's different around her, I want to see that even with the way that his eyes move, But overall, it was a decent performance. It just wasn't giving me kind of like nuance that I want to kind of like make me really feel that, his treatment of her is that special. Imada Mio's performance was the one that really shined in this project. Is it overall like a decent film? Sure. If you're not that particular in terms of, you know, all of these other things, I think from me, I'm coming from the perspective of having seen his other projects as well and having my opinions as well. So I'm a bit nitpicky when it comes to his performance in this particular film. But overall, like, if you watch it as it is, and you know, and you came for this particular story, is it good? Like, yeah, it's a decent watch. It's a nice, like, again, the pacing is okay despite having very different arcs, obviously condensed, that it makes for a decent origin story of a love story, if you will. And again, it's centered on the kind of like love story aspect of it as well, which I think works if your leads have the chemistry that they have. So do I recommend it? Sure. Has it become like this film that I would really want to like watch over and over again? Personally, not for me. But if you're looking for like a decent love story that isn't like a high school kind of like narrative or anything like that, if you're just looking for, you know, a kind of like nice love story with also touches of fantasy that's a little bit historical, all of these things, it is a decently produced film, and it's cool. It's cool, and I'm just really happy that they made it available in Philippine cinemas for other people to watch. So yeah. With that said, so let's talk it out in the comments below. Have you seen this film? What are your thoughts on this film? Did you like it? Have you seen either of the actors in different other projects, and what are your impressions of them? Let's talk it out down in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel and you would want to hear more from me, please hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you again soon in a new one. Bye!